finally, the man of the hour. I'm really looking forward to this. With me and tasting with me is Paul Pender, longtime winemaker at Tawse, a legend in Ontario. He was winemaker of the year in 2011. Tawse has been the Canadian winery of the year in 2010, 11, 12, and 16. So from the Tawse Winery in Niagara, I'm pleased and honored to be joined by Paul Pender. Welcome.
Thank you, Jordan. It is great to be here, and I hope things are going well at Langdon Hall as you're reopening, and I'm sure it's an exciting time, so and a busy time. So thank you for taking the time tonight to do this.
Oh man, exciting times for everybody. Patios are opening, things are getting back to normal, things are getting more positive. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
It feels good.
Yeah, so as we go through these wines tonight, for those of you, there's a whole bunch of people tasting groups of 4, and they're making a night out of it. So for all of you, those people that are tasting along, feel free to leave comments in the chat box, and we'll get to them as we go. But yeah, let's get started. So before we jump into tasting these wines and working through them, let's learn about Paul. How did you get into wine? Before Tawse, before all that stuff?
Before Tawse, I was a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
And lived in Toronto, and we moved to Niagara in 99 or 2000, and I had a carpentry business, bought an old barn up in St. Anne's and a old farmhouse and converted it into a barn and or a workshop, and had some chickens and was living on the farm. And the more I was working with wood, I became allergic to it and to dust and to solvents and stuff. And we had some friends down from Toronto one weekend, and I was at the point where I'm like, I need to make a change in my career. I don't want to be 50 years old and not be able to ride my bike because I have asthma, because I can't because of the dust. So I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? Like, I was thinking, maybe become an architect, because I had the building and the carpentry background, and talking to a lot of people, and they're like, oh, don't do architect, you'll hate it, you'll be stuck at a desk all day. And so I was out one day tasting wine with a friend from Toronto, and we were at Danny Lenko's place, for those who know the Lenko Winery, and we were there at the kitchen table tasting wines, and this light bulb went off, and I'm like, oh my God, this could be like, people actually make a living making wine. This is like so cool. And I talked to Danny about it, and my dream at that time was, okay, I'm going to go back to school, I'm going to buy 5 acres of land and start a small winery. And things didn't work out exactly that way, but I went back to school and did my co-op at Tawse, and Tawse at that time was just kind of starting. They hadn't even opened their doors yet, but had been making wine for a few years. And there at a great time and a great opportunity, and was able to kind of stay on after my co-op, and very early on became the winemaker, and was able to grow with the company from a young age, and take it from 1,000 cases a year up to now we're doing, between Tawse and Redstone, close to 40,000 cases.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's grown so much. Did you do the program at Brock?
I did the Niagara College program.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. So you've been with Tawse then right from the start, right from their start?
Maury bought the property in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So this year is our 20th anniversary. And we were trying to decide, with all the COVID and lockdown, we're like, how do we celebrate this properly? So we're still trying to work on something. But 20 years ago, Maury bought his first 5 acres of land. It was the Robbins Block Chardonnay with the Carly's Block Riesling beside it. So just over about 5.5 acres. And he bought that land because he was at a tasting in Toronto. And at that point, he had become fairly successful in his banking business and had always been a lover of Burgundy and had wanted to start a winery, but he was thinking to start a winery in Burgundy and to go over to Burgundy and buy some land. And someone who knew him was at this tasting and put a glass of Chardonnay in front of him and blind tasted him. And Maury, of course, went straight to Burgundy, and he was talking, whether it was Merceau and something rich, but also that great minerality and acidity, and went off about this. And then the person unveiled the wine, and it was an Ontario Chardonnay made by Deborah Pascas, for those who know the Ontario wine industry. She was the first winemaker at Tawse, and was there when I started. And it blew him away so much that he thought, why am I going to Burgundy to make wine when we can make this quality of wine in my backyard? So he drove down to Niagara the next weekend and bought his first 5 acres, and was only going to make 1,000 cases a year, and only by appointment. You had to be on the list to get it. And here we are where we are now. But all because somebody blind tasted him on an Ontario Chardonnay.
I love those stories in wine, and they're all through the wine world. Sort of happened on accident.
Yeah.
But thanks to that person that gave him that blind taste of wine, because
Absolutely,
we've all benefited from that. So Tawse, when it opened, that building that's there now, that's the only building that I know that's Tawse.
Exactly.
So that didn't exist, obviously, when it first opened. There was no tasting room, none of that stuff. What did Tawse look like at the start?
Basically, if you've been to Tawse, and where the 5 acres of the Robbins block is, there's a little green barn down the hill from Tawse, and that was the only building on the property when Maury bought the place. And the 2001 vintage was made in that barn.
Wow.
And in 2002, the Maury purchased a little more land, kind of in behind where the David's block is now, for those who know the vineyards, and from Vineland Estates. So you'd have a big enough parcel to build the winery. And construction started in 2002 and finished in 2005, the year that I started. So we hadn't actually sold any wine until 2005. And Deborah had made some small vintages of Chardonnay, a small amount of Cabernet Franc, and a very small amount of Pinot. And again, a couple thousand liters of Riesling up until that point. So really great wine, but very small amounts of wine at that point. What
did Niagara look like in those years? Like, there's a lot more producers and stuff now than there ever was before.
Yeah, 2005 was really like a little bit of like a heyday in Niagara. There was a lot of investment, a lot of guys like Maury, Harold Teal, trying to think of other, I think the Foreign Affair had started around that time, Fielding, Flat Rock, like all these kind of estate wineries were starting around that point. There was a lot of investment, a lot of excitement. There hasn't been that many new wineries in that 5-year period since then. Like now it's very slow, maybe a winery every couple of years, but 2005 to 2010, there was probably like 8 to 10 new wineries every year. Mm-hmm. Great time to get into the industry. There were a lot of opportunities and a lot of passion, a lot of excitement. And yeah, now it's, but you know, from somebody who moved to Niagara in early 2000s from Toronto, downtown Toronto, you know, you couldn't find a good restaurant to go to in Niagara at that point. And now everywhere you look, there's a great restaurant. Some attached to wineries and some just doing their own thing. And it really has become a wonderful place to live over the years. And the first 5 years I lived here, I thought, I'm moving back to Toronto. I'm moving back to Toronto. And now I would never move back. I love it here, and it has become home.
Yeah, we like visiting it too. Actually, the last time I ate in a restaurant before COVID happened, I was at Treadwell the very last night. Like,
amazing!
Like the world shut down the next day, so that was. I haven't been in a restaurant since. So that was to eat. That was the last time I ate at a restaurant. So me and my wife go to Niagara often. That's Treadwell's definitely on our stop. We go there often.
It's a fantastic spot. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I consider Tawse, again, before we jump into these wines, I consider Tawse and you sort of a pioneer in the world of organic and biodynamic farming, especially in Ontario. Can you give a brief description of what that means for people listening along?
Absolutely. So when I started the Tawse, it was a really great fit with Maury and I. And, you know, I am a bit of an old hippie, and, you know, always, you know, we lived in St. Anne's, this little country farmhouse, and we had chickens and pigs and sheep, and, you know, grew organic vegetables. And I've always been an advocate for, you know, growing organically and eating organic food. And you know, to get this job at a winery where the owner is like, let's go organic. All the best wines in the world are organic, and to be given free reign to make that transition right off the start, it was fantastic. And we did it for a number of reasons. I think I think the best wines are in the world are coming out of organic vineyards. If you look to Burgundy or Barolo or even Chianti, places in Germany, places they don't even talk about it necessarily, but they grow organically. And I think we want living soils that are alive with microbes that really, when our vines are growing on these soils, they have definition and personality when it comes to the wine, the finished wine. And I believe that happens because we have living soil. So that, Cory Road tastes distinctly like Cory Road versus Robin Block because of the soils and the microbes in there that make the nutrients available to the plant. If we were to feed our plants from above, with, a bag of Monsanto fertilizer, we would grow amazing grapes. We would make great wine, but I think they would have less of a definition of terroir because they're not searching for those nutrients in the soil. They're being fed from above. So it's kind of an equalizing thing. And so to be able to have that opportunity from day one was fantastic. And I jumped on it and was super excited to make the conversion to organics. We started in 2006 when I took over, and we received our certification in 2010.
Yeah, it's a long road. There's more and more people doing it now. But I like that you brought that up as far as wineries around the world, and I try and tell people that all the time. That the majority of great producers around the world are all organic. They might not be certified. It might not be on the label. We all know how Italian bureaucracy is, but it's all about sustainability and doing the right thing for not even just your vineyards and your wines, but the planet. Like it's doing the best thing in farming practices, which is really, really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like if you look at Domaine de la Romanée-Conti, they are fully organic. Yeah. But they're not sticking that on their label.
I don't know if that would fit on that label.
Exactly.
I don't know if that's a fit. So should we jump into the first wine, Paul?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for those of you that are tasting at home, Paul suggested that, we're the first two wines we're going to taste. They're Burgundian varietals, so we're going to taste as the Burgundians do. And we're going to start with the Cherry Avenue Pinot Noir 2017 vintage for all of you that are tasting along. I opened mine about half an hour ago, and it smells beautiful, but I'm going to let Paul take it away and tell us all about it.
So you have the 2018, correct?
We have 17.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So 2017 was a cool, wet year in Niagara. We really didn't get a whole lot of sunshine. I think the hottest day in the summer was like 24, 25 degrees Celsius, and it rained a lot. So we struggled. We worked so hard in the vineyard to keep it clean and to, get ripeness. And we were a little bit worried come September whether we were going to even be able to ripen a lot of the varieties. Like Pinot and Chard ripen every year. And September 1st, the weather changed, and we had this glorious month of September where it was 28, 29 degrees every day and sunny and beautiful. And because we were so far behind, we had nothing to pick all September. So it was amazing for me. We got to spend all September, with the weekends off and not a lot to do. So I remember September 28th was a Saturday. We went down to the beach in Grimsby and we swam all day, paddleboard, spent the entire day in the water. It was that warm. And then harvest started the next day. And it was full tilt. And that 1 month of sunshine really allowed us to ripen wines, but also maintain acidity because they're nice for getting cool. So really a beautiful year for wines like Pinot, Chard, Riesling. Long growing year. When we can extend the growing year longer, we get more flavor development, more complexity, just a little more in-depth wine. So the wines ended up being, I think they're elegant, they're perfumed, they're more on the pretty side. They're not really big and structured, but really a gorgeous example of what Ontario Pinot can be in a cool year. So this would be considered by most people as an off year. I think it's the kind of year that I like to drink.
Yeah, it is. It is super, super elegant, really pale in the glass.
Yeah.
It's vibrant as well, but it's like unmistakably Pinot Noir. Like it's not, it's nothing but Pinot Noir, which is the best, which is what you're hoping for.
Absolutely. And what I'm really finding really kind of nice to see now in Niagara, for a long time, we were insecure about the size of our Pinot in Niagara and like how big it was, how structured, how dark it was. And, you go to Burgundy and you drink Pot de Tar. It's like an elegant, beautiful, light, very pale colored wine for $1,000 a bottle. And it's just, but we had come from in Niagara with an insecurity about, can we really ripen grapes here? So we always wanted to make them bigger and darker and richer. And I think Pinot doesn't want that. And, great Pinot is not necessarily that. And I'm finding now people are feeling more secure about that. Let's not push this. Let's not try for a big extraction. Let's really embrace our cool climate. And it's something now that Burgundy is suffering from because they don't have a cool climate very many years anymore. Like they have summers where it's 35 degrees every day for 90 days. And that's what California was in the 90s. So their climate is changing, our climate is changing, but I think that we should still hang on to and celebrate that we can make cool climate wines here.
Yeah, totally agree with you. On the Burgundy comment, you can really start to notice that in some of the more recent Chardonnay vintages. That climate getting warmer, those are almost like the wines are getting richer, they're getting bigger, they're getting
bigger. And I don't like it in the Burgundy Chards, but I really like the Pinots, I have to say, are really enticing and voluptuous and easy to drink, easy to young. The Chards I find are a little bit too big and California-esque for me now. But
Totally agree with you. So this wine and all these wines that we're going to taste tonight, they're all single vineyard wines. Now, is that something that you've done right from the start? Has that always been a Tawse thing, or did that evolve?
Absolutely. So because of Maury's love of Burgundy, it was really an exploration of terroir. And when I started, we made the Robins Block. We made a Laundry Cabernet Franc from a grower we worked with, and we made the Carly's Block Riesling. And we had planted a little bit of Pinot. We hadn't had any Pinot come to the age where we could pick it yet. But it was always about terroir. It was a wonderful way for me to learn about wine and about terroir. And we started working with a bunch of different growers in 2006. And, we really got to discover where the best Pinot was growing in Niagara. We had probably 8 or 9 different growers every year for Pinot, for Chard, for Riesling, for Cabernet Franc. And then after working them for a number of years, we started to buy vineyards in different sites and plant our own vineyards to certain varieties. We still work with some growers sometimes, but mostly we're estate now. But it takes a long time to, the Burgundians, again, have been at it for 1,000 years. And now they know what grows where and what doesn't. Niagara is a very young wine industry where we've been growing vinifera and really paying attention to terroir and what site does well. And a great example of that is our Redstone site. It's heavy red clay soils. It is so great for Bordeaux Reds, Cab Sauv, Merlot, Cab Franc, Syrah. They shine on those sites. Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, not so good. They like a little more kind of a little more slope, a little more kind of limestone, gravelly soils, not the heavy clay. So there's not a good site or a bad site, but trying to find the right variety to plant, and it really makes a big difference.
So on the topic of Pinot Noir, I have a question here from somebody who's watching. Can you explain the difference between escarpment or bench Pinot Noir and Niagara on the Lake Pinot Noir?
Great question. Yeah, absolutely. So Niagara on the Lake essentially was a swamp, and it's really got very rich, fertile soils. flat, low-lying lands, really hot in the summer. Usually they're about a week or two ahead of us in terms of ripeness, where we are on the bench. And they can grow a lot more grapes per acre than we can. So they can get, 4 to 8 tons per acre for their vineyard because they have these very rich, fertile soils. On the bench where we are growing on limestone on a slope, we get 2 to 3 tons an acre. And we just can't get that crop off of our vineyards because our vines are not, growing in this rich loam. So I think, it's a great advantage to Niagara Lake growers because they can get a lot more crop and they can make good wines out there. But I don't think it's great Pinot Noir terroir. I think it gives you a fairly kind of, fruity, simple wine for the most part. But that being said, there are pockets in Niagara on the Lake that have different soil structures. So I'm giving you a blanket statement, but because we have a glacial history in Ontario, where the glaciers came in and out and moved the soils around, we have sites in Niagara, like along the Niagara River, where there's incredible amounts of limestone and some clay and other stuff. But overall, Niagara on the Lake is, more fertile, kind of more uniform, so less kind of maybe specific terroir, less minerality in the wines because there's not a lot of limestone. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great. I have one more for you while we're on it. And I don't know if you know the exact year, but when did Niagara start making wine? Question from from the audience.
Niagara has been making wine for over 200 years. There's a guy called John Schiller, and he planted grapevines in Ontario over 200 years ago in Niagara. And they were grapes that came up from the U.S., from the southern U.S. And that's when wine started to be made during Prohibition. There was more wine made in Niagara than there is now. Probably wasn't very good, but there was a big appetite for it across the Niagara River. So wine was made. There were close to 400 wineries during Prohibition time in Ontario. And these were all kind of licensed wineries. And those licenses now are owned by Peller and Arterra. And those are like when you go into the grocery store and you see Wine Rack or those different wine stores, those are all come from pre-existing licenses that go back into the 18 and 19, or like 1920s and late 1800s. So there were a lot of wineries then, and these companies were able to buy these up in the past. And that's why they can have retail stores in other places.
Oh, I didn't know that at all. Crazy.
Yeah, so we have a very long history, but only a short history of making vinifera. I think the first vinifera was planted in Ontario in 1959.
Yeah. So yeah, still a really young wine growing region. And awesome. Should we jump into the next wine, Paul?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So the next wine we're going to taste is the 2018 Cory Road Chardonnay, which I will be honest with you, I cheated a little bit and tasted it before we jumped on here, and it's very Burgundian. But again, I'm going to let you take it away and tell me about it.
Beautiful. So my favorite vineyard for Chardonnay that we work with and we own, Maury bought this site in 2005, the year I started. So I've been working with it since he's owned it. We converted it to organics, and then it has started off kind of the ugly duckling of the vineyards, and it wasn't super happy with the Chardonnays coming out of there. And over the years, it has really turned around as we've converted it to our organics, and really the vineyard has really kind of come alive, and used to have these really like phenolic bitter components to the wine, and now it's just this beautiful kind of acid backbone, mineral driven Chardonnay that if you close your eyes, you're in Burgundy. And we have a fun story to tell you about that. In 2010, I think, we had Alan Meadows, who is a wine writer from the US who writes about Burgundy. And he has a magazine called The Burghounds. And a group of wineries in Ontario brought him in as a guest speaker for an event we were having called Summerness. And he came, and Maury being Maury, the owner of Tawse, he had a blind tasting set up for Alan. And because, we have wine writers coming from all around the world to our places, and they taste our wines. But they come with these preconceived notions, and they come with this idea that we're a little backwater, and we have great ambition, but maybe we're not making great wines. So, and they say, great wine for Ontario, and we think wine is great or it's not great, no matter where it's from, and we want people to taste with their, prejudice put aside. So we blind tasted Alan Meadows and said, there are 5 wines here, 4 from Tawse and 1 from Tawse in Burgundy. So all of Maury's wines, and there was a Merceau in the pack, and we told him what it was. Because pick out the Merceau. How hard can that be? Goes through and he blind tastes all these wines. He's a good sport about it, and he's like, well, this is obviously the Merceau. It's got the minerality and that structure and that weight and blah blah blah. And he pulls off the lid, and it was the Cory Road.
Wow.
And then he went through every subsequent wine, and the last wine he picked was the Merceau. I say that not to say that we are fantastic or anything, but I think as a region in Niagara, we have what Burgundy has in terms of limestone in our soils. We have a great slope. We have a great cool climate, and we have it more so than Burgundy in some sites. And it was an eye opener for us, and great for us to see this, because if he had tasted the wine knowing what it was, he would have said the Merceau was 10 times better. But his favorite wine was the Cory Road, and we do a bunch of blind tastings at our winery all the time because of Maury's connection with Burgundy. And even though it's an ocean apart, the similarities are so close, and we have these wonderful mineral-driven wines that come from these amazing soils. And Cory Road is one of those sites. The winemaking is very simple and Burgundian. We hand-pick the grapes. We put them in the press whole cluster, press the juice, settle it overnight in a tank, put the juice into barrel. We don't add any yeast. We allow the wild yeast to ferment. A few days later, they start to ferment in the barrels. They spend 12 months in barrel, where the fermentation and aging happens. After 12 months, we remove the wine from the barrel, put it into a stainless steel tank, age it for 6 more months in stainless steel, and then we put it into bottle. So really, our winemaking is pretty non-interventionist, and the flavor and the personality comes from the vineyard.
Yeah, well, I mean, goes without saying, this wine's wonderful and super Burgundian. I circling back to what you said earlier, and I love doing this for people. You get a lot of people that say they don't like Chardonnay. That's a common thing that you hear. And I actually like it when I'm, working at the restaurant. I don't like Chardonnay. I was like, okay, that's a challenge. I like this. Let me pour you something from Ontario, because the thought that people have of Chardonnay oftentimes is that California Chardonnay, that really big oaky monster, which those wines have their purpose too. There's absolutely no disrespect there whatsoever. But wines like this are a whole different animal. This is, absolutely. It has that freshness. It has that minerality. It's super food versatile. Again, the wines are fantastic. Question about these two. The vines themselves, I assume they're all Burgundian clones. The question is, are they originally from France?
Yes. So all of our grapevines in Ontario, not all, but 90% of them come from nurseries in Europe and predominantly France. So, yeah.
All from France. Now, obviously you and Maury, and especially Maury, I've met him a couple times, and just from following him on Instagram, he's obviously a Burgundian lover. And Chardonnay and Pinot Noir were a focus for you and him right from the start. What other grape varieties did you grow at the start?
We had 1 acre of Riesling.
Yeah.
We worked with a grower who grew Cabernet Franc. So we started off making 4 varieties, and that was it. And those 4 are still our core varieties. Like, even though we make a lot of different wines and a lot of different varietals, in terms of volume, those 4 varieties would make about 80% of our production. And then we play around with a little bit. We have 3 acres of Gewürztraminer on the Cory Road site that came with the property when we purchased it. So we keep making it. It's kind of fun. We do a little bit of Sauv Blanc, a little bit of Merlot, a little bit of Syrah, all on sites that we kind of, as we bought the properties, they had these on them. And, as a winemaker, it's a lot of fun. As a wine drinker, it's fun. But I wouldn't put wouldn't base my business plan on these varieties. But they are, we can grow a lot of different varieties in Niagara, and it's fun to have, a lot of things to play with. It makes my job interesting. And, for the consumer, it's fun when you show up at the winery and want to try something a bit different. You go to Redstone, you can buy Semillon, which is kind of fun. We have an acre that I planted 6 years ago. And so those are all kind of the fun parts. But it's all fun. But those are the kind of, unique and fun things for us to kind of play around with, to make some blends. And they do surprisingly well.
Yeah, it's fun for sommeliers too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like pouring those wines, all of them, very, very much. Another question here. Can you explain the logic behind tasting the red before the white?
Yes. So I've been very lucky working with Maury. He's exposed me to just amazing wines, mostly Burgundy, and has been so very generous and has taken me to Burgundy almost yearly to do a bunch of tastings and really taste some of the best wines in the world. And I think it's really allowed me to imagine what wines can be, and to really strive for the very, very best. And in Burgundy, when you sit down and you do a structured tasting, they start with the Pinot, which is very and the opposite of what we do everywhere else in the world. And so I asked this when I was there at one tasting. I'm like, why are we starting with the? And the reason why is when you're in Burgundy and you're starting and you're going to taste, any typical producer you visit will make Pinot Noir from 6 to 15 different vineyards, and you'll start at the lower village wines and work your way up all the way to the Grand Cru. And as those wines get into the better and better vineyards and the better sites, your tannins start to build. The wines are bigger and richer, and you can appreciate the differences in every wine. And then after you finish your best Pinot Noir, you start on your entry-level Chardonnay. And it's really a palate cleanser. And what I've been told is that you go the opposite way and you build up from your entry-level Chardonnay all the way to the top Chardonnay, where you're having this big, rich kind of, Merceau or, I don't know, it would be a good Montrachet type of Chardonnay, where it's really like, and then you go from there to like a lean entry-level Pinot. Just doesn't taste good. You don't appreciate the first 2 Pinots are kind of a write-off because you've gone from these big red Chardonnays to not necessarily green, but kind of leaner, more astringent wine. So when you go the opposite way, that very light, lean Chardonnay really is refreshing and crisp, and you can get to enjoy it as it kind of cleans your mouth and your palate out from all of the tannin buildup from the red wines. And so since being there and experiencing that, I like to taste red to white.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I've never been, but I'd love to go. Last question before we move on to the Riesling. At what temperature do you recommend serving the Chardonnay at?
So I don't have a number in my head, but I think a lot depends on the weather. For me, if I am sitting out on a really hot, sunny day on a patio, give it to me icy cold, because it's going to warm up in my glass really fast. And I'm going to want that somewhere in between, I'm going to find that balance. If it's the middle of winter and I am sitting in a cold restaurant, serve it to me a little bit warmer. And so I think it's, you know, I would say, like, if you're in your house and it's kind of climate controlled, put it in the fridge for half an hour before you drink it. Take it out of the basement that's already cool. Fridge for half an hour. You don't want it too cold, but you also don't want it too warm. Like, I like a little chill on it. I also like a little chill on my reds as well. So, you know, historically we would drink reds at cellar temperature, but cellar temperature would probably be 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Not, you know, what our house is, that's 72, 75. So you want it to be a little bit colder than a cold cellar for your Chardonnay. Riesling even a bit colder than that, I would say.
It's I'm glad you brought up reds. Right as you brought up reds, Natalie just asked us that exact question. So that answers her question as well. That's perfect.
But I think, Jordan, I would love to hear your input on this, because as a thom and a person who serves wine all the time, and you probably drink far more interesting wines than I do on a daily basis. And how do you like to see them?
So I kind of agree with you. If we're tasting aromatic varietals or lighter wines, I like them freezing cold. Like, I like them at 3 or 4 degrees. Chardonnay, stuff that has a little bit more body, a little bit more richness. I like, and I can give a number. I like, you know, between like that 10 to 14 degrees, like something a little bit warmer, where it's not cold, but it's not warm either, like sort of in between, slightly chilled. I find that shows the best. When we get into reds, I also like my reds slightly chilled, especially if it's Pinot Noir or, you know, Gamay or some of those lighter varietals. I like them slightly chilled, like almost the same temperature as I like, say, Chardonnay. I don't like any red that's room temperature, to be honest with you. I think and this is the answer that I get, because I got asked this question a lot. You know, most people keep their wines in the kitchen, which is the warmest place in your house. So if most of our houses are at 21, 22 degrees, your kitchen's probably 23, 24, especially when you're drinking wine, you're probably cooking or entertaining, which heats up the kitchen also. So I like to keep, you know, if I'm having red at dinner, I usually put it in the fridge for, you know, 30, 45 minutes before I'm drinking it, personally. Now, the other thing that I always say, I mean, those are all technical terms, and that's how I like to drink them. If you like to drink your wine out of the microwave in a thermos, then have at it. Like, however you enjoy drinking it, then just keep enjoying it. As long as people are drinking wine and enjoying how they drink wine, then that's cool with me. I'm happy to do it however you want. But that's my opinion and what I think, which is basically just echoing what you said.
I have a question, if that's okay to ask.
Yeah.
Thoughts on ice cubes in wine?
Again, I know that I am supposed to say don't do it ever. I don't do it. I wouldn't do it. However, like I said, if that's what if you put ice cubes in your wine, then keep doing it. Like who am I to say don't do that, or you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that? I personally think the wine world, as far as consumption goes, has too many rules. It has too many, like, you know what I mean? Just, if you enjoy drinking with ice cubes, drink it with ice cubes. How about it? That's my whole philosophy on that whole subject. I wasn't always like that. It took me a while to have my own opinion on that. Yeah, again, I don't do it. I don't recommend it. But if you like to do it and you like it with ice cubes, then good on you. I think that's great.
I had a debate with a few friends of mine in the wine industry, and a couple of friends who are like, absolutely, ice cubes. The amount of dilution is so minimal, and in the summertime it gets so hot you can't even enjoy it. And versus, I would be on the non-ice cube side myself, but I'm like, maybe I should open my mind up to ice cubes. But
yeah,
it is.
Again, however you like to drink it, I think that's great. So before we move into the next wine, I have to tell you and everybody listening that for those that know me, I am a Riesling fanatic. And this is a dead true story. Tawse Riesling is the Riesling that got me into Riesling. I was studying sommelier. I was doing the CAPS program, and I was working at a restaurant in Waterloo. And the sommelier at the time, him and I sat down after work one night, and he opened the 2010 Carly's Block Riesling. I'll never forget it. It was 2010 vintage. This was a couple years old. And that was really the Riesling that got me into Ontario Riesling, which then springboarded me into Alsatian Riesling and German Riesling and Australian Riesling and all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to move on to this next wine, which is the Cory Road Riesling, 2018 vintage. But one of my favorite varietals that not only just comes out of Ontario, but comes like worldwide. I'm a huge collector and drinker of Riesling.
It makes me happy to hear that. I am a big lover of Riesling, and when I started at Tawse, we had an acre, and Maury was not a lover of Riesling, and I suggested we make more Riesling because it's so good and we do it so well in Niagara, and he's like, nobody buys a Riesling. Maury, Riesling is the best, and you just don't know wine. He would say that, and so eventually, we contracted a couple more acres of Riesling, and I love, one of my first loves was Mosel Riesling, and that kind of lower alcohol, top dry, high acid, mineral driven Rieslings is my love too. And so that's the style that we kind of emulate, and that's where we look to for inspiration. So, we pick our wines, our Rieslings really early. Really, when the acid starts to drop, we pick, because I want to have a lot of acidity in these wines. I don't care about sugar. And I think Riesling has flavor from really early on all the way through the end. So you can make so many different styles. But the style that I like to make is typically it's less than 10% alcohol. It's around 20, 25 grams of residual sugar. We stop it quite early, but so much acid that the wine is refreshing and cleansing, and it doesn't come across as sweet at all. And we now have about 50 acres of Riesling planted, and one of the biggest varieties that we make, and has been a huge success story. And it has become one of almost the backbone of our business. And it grows well every year. It's cold hardy. You can ripen it in a hot year. 2018 was a really hot year, but the wine is still bright and fresh and crisp. And it really is a phenomenal variety for this region. And we need more people to appreciate how great it is and how good it is with food. I think it is probably the best white wine to pair with food. It's so versatile. You can have it with oysters. You can have it with really rich kind of stinky cheeses. You can have it with charcuterie. You can have it with fun Asian-inspired flavors. Really, it goes across the board.
I get asked often, because I am obsessed with Riesling, what do I like to pair Riesling with? And my usual answer is cereal or Caesar salad or steak. It doesn't really matter. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It works.
I've never had it with steak, actually.
Yeah, it's again, it's I'm fanatical about it, and I think it takes a little bit of explanation for people. Like, there's that assumption that Riesling is always sweet, and oftentimes there is sugar. Like, this has residual sugar that's there, but Riesling is so high in acid that you need that sugar to balance it out, or it's like almost like enamel ripping. Like, if you get like those young Alsatian Rieslings or Clare Valley Rieslings, they can be almost like too sharp or like hard to drink. But a well-balanced Riesling, with like when you talked about balancing the acid and the sugar, I mean, if it's well balanced, it's not overly sweet. It's a delicious wine.
Exactly, yeah. And what other variety maintains acidity quite like Riesling?
Yeah.
So much acid.
Question on this Riesling: how long do you think this Riesling could age for?
Indefinitely. We've been making the Carly's block now for 20 years, and I haven't opened a bottle yet that's oxidized. And we have them in the cellar going back 20 years, and now we're under screw cap. They'll live even longer. The biggest wild card with the older bottles of Tawse Rieslings are how good is the cork. And cork is a natural product, and over the years it's been wildly improved. But 20 years ago when I started, or 15 years ago, the corks were really kind of hit and miss. You know, you can open a bottle that's not so good, but it's not because the wine wasn't good when it went into bottle, but it's because the cork wasn't a really good seal. And now we've gone to screw cap for all Rieslings, and it really has been a game changer in terms of consistency. And you can open a bottle 10 years later and it's still super fresh. You know, Riesling is one of the longest aged wines in the world. A friend of mine in Burgundy went to a tasting in Germany where he tried a Riesling that was like 400 years old and said it was still tasted good. Like, I can't imagine that. And but it's like it lives forever because of the acidity, the sugar. These are all things that help to preserve it. And the variety itself obviously has got, you know, the makings for something that lives a long time.
Yeah, I again, I try to iterate that all the time. That Riesling is so age-worthy, and I love old Riesling. I love when it gets all those tertiary flavors. Question about bottle shape. Question is, why is the Riesling bottle in a much different shape than the Chardonnay?
So that is probably a good question for you to answer, Jordan. But I goes back to a kind of tradition. The Hock bottle, I think, is a German-inspired bottle. You go to Germany, all the Rieslings are in that shape, and we have emulated that. You know, we, out of kind of respect for where the wines come from and the style, we take the bottle choice of the country where the kind of wine is most known. So Germans have used the Hock bottle for forever on the Riesling, and I don't know why.
I was hoping you did, because I don't know either. Either of these bottles, actually. I mean, it's just, this is a Burgundy bottle, this is a Alsatian bottle or a Riesling bottle, but I don't actually know the reason. I could tell you, I mean, when we get into Bordeaux and things like that, but I don't know the reason for either of these. So that's a great question that I'm not sure of.
I do love the way the Hock bottle looks, and we also do magnums of Riesling, of the single vineyards, and it's probably like over 2 feet tall, and it's just a beautiful. It's almost like a piece of art. It's like a vase, and it sits on when it's on the table. And they're a pain in the ass, as if you're a sommelier trying to store it in your wine cellar because they don't fit in any racks. Too tall, but they really look very impressive at the dinner table.
I've actually bought that wine out of Magnum a few times myself from the bottle shop. I know.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's lovely. I'm a sucker for Magnums. So before we kind of sort of start to wrap this up, I want to talk about just the Niagara region in general for a minute. I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like from my perspective, from a consumer perspective, in the last 10 to 15 years, Niagara's taken this huge leap in quality. And we've talked a lot about, you know, choosing the right varietal for the right site, and things like that, and understanding the terroir and our climate. Do you think all of those things, do you think more and more producers are getting, I mean, we're a young region, but do you think that producers are getting to know their land more and planting what grows well on their land, and maybe not what's going to sell, like going with what works first?
Absolutely. I think, like I said, from 2000 to maybe 2008, 2009, there was a big influx of people who loved wine investing in the region, and really wanted to make phenomenal wines. And I think that kind of like third wave of wineries in Niagara really kind of pushed the quality level up. And I would include wineries like Flat Rock and Hidden Bench and Fielding, and there's more, but these are the ones that come to my mind around that time period. They really wanted to make great wine. These are people who had made their, you know, success in their other businesses, and they wanted to bring that success to something. They weren't in this because they wanted to just make a big profit. They wanted to make great wines, and they brought that belief in quality that, you know, I'm really going to, you know, not cut any corners. I'm going to make. They invested in great facilities, great wineries, planted great vineyards, and really didn't want to skip any quality measures for these wines. And that really had an impact on the overall industry. where before you couldn't, if you just made a Chardonnay, people didn't really care where it was from. And there was an emphasis on where does it come from, who's your grower, who's your winemaker, sometimes was even important. We got together as an industry and we really pushed each other to kind of grow and to make better and better wines. And I think, and that kind of trickled down into the relationships with the different growers. And instead of just, grapes showing up on your door at harvest from your grower, you worked with your grower throughout the year. And you said, I would like to maybe have a little less crop in the vineyard. I'd like some more leaves removed. I'd like to have this. I want to wait for this ripeness level. And the growers working with the winemakers really improved the quality of the grapes. And then we paid extra to the growers and bonuses based on certain work being done. And obviously, like, this is such a cliche, but great wine isn't made, it's grown. And working with great growers and estate wineries growing their own grapes, focusing on growing amazing grapes, really had a big part of the quality of the wine being made. Before that, a lot of winemakers didn't step foot in the vineyard. They just, grapes arrived and they just processed it like they were processing anything else. And that doesn't happen anymore in Niagara. Every winemaker, I think, is super involved in the vineyard and in the fruit, and is out there on a daily basis making decisions and tasting grapes. So I think that is really a big element of why the wine has improved so much in Niagara in the last 10 to 15 years.
And that's good for everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
All of us in this region. Now, Tawse has moved into doing a lot of spirits, vermouth, cider, all that kind of stuff. Do you have anything to do with that, or is that a whole separate?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was in Burgundy with Maury a number of years ago, and tasting wines at his winery. We went for lunch one day in town, and we're looking out, and there's this guy driving a tractor pulling a wood-fired still from winery to winery to winery. And they would, everyone brings out all their marc and their skins from the ferment, and this guy goes about and he distills everybody's skins and all the leftover crap from harvest, gives them back alcohol, which is like Marc de Bourgogne or Fin de Bourgogne, and then they would age it in their barrels as like a kind of like an aged grappa. And everybody by law has to distill their waste as opposed to throwing it into a landfill. And they was, oh my God, we should have a still in Niagara. So we looked at this, and at the time, the rules in Ontario were if you wanted to have a commercial still, you had to have a certain size that was so big that we didn't want to get into that business. And then a number of years ago that changed, and there was no more size restriction on the still. And we bought a 1,000 liter pot still with a couple columns and a gin basket, and we started distilling, and being a whole lot of fun. And we make gin, we make whiskey, we make vermouth, which is one of the most fun things we've made so far. We do vodka, and we're working on a few other things. We have a Calvados that's been aging in barrel now for about 2.5 years, and will come out soon. And there's so many fun things. We have, Niagara just grows amazing fruit, and I would love to get into some fruit brandies and distilled some wine and stuff of that nature.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. Couple questions before we let you go, if that's okay. Where am I here? Out of the 3 bottles we tasted, do you have a favorite?
Oh, depending on what I'm eating.
Yeah, fair enough. That's my answer too.
Do you have crab legs? I want the Riesling.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite grape variety that you work with?
You know what? I don't. It's I love them all. Chardonnay is just like a workhorse, and consistent, and I think we do it very, very well at Tawse, and we really understand it. And rarely am I surprised with what comes out. And Pinot Noir is great because it's such a pain in the ass and so difficult, and you're like, but everybody wants to make amazing Pinot. So when we nail it, we're like, and Riesling, I love to drink, and also like very consistent. And so they're all fun in their own ways, and they're all, but I think Pinot, if I could only make one wine forever, it would be Pinot. And I would strive to make it as best I could every year, because it's so challenging.
That's well, they don't call it that. Is it the fickle grape? Is that what they call it?
The heartbreak grape.
The heartbreak grape. I knew there was some sort of something to that. So very last question, and this is a non-wine related question. I've been to a couple Jim Cuddy concerts on the lawn at Tawse. I've been there quite a few. Well, I think 2 or 3 times. Great event for anybody watching that hasn't been. You can sit in a lawn chair, drink Tawse wines from the bottle, not like draft beer from a plastic cup. There's food trucks, great music. I just want to know how cool that guy is.
Jim's pretty damn cool. Yeah, so we've been working with Jim musically for over 10 years now. And great musician, and incredible performer and professional. Loves wine, and his favorite wine region is Barolo, but also a big fan of Tuscan wines, and he loves to go over to Italy and cycle through the hills. So after working with him for years in the musical side and doing the annual concert, we talked to him about maybe doing a Jim Cuddy wine, and he jumped on the opportunity. He was super excited, and he approached it the same way he approached music, very professionally. Came in and we sat down and tasted all the wines. He got a great palate, and we kind of proposed, these are the wines that we can use to blend. And we did a Cab Merlot and a Chardonnay the first year, and we still continue to make those. And we've also done a bit of a sparkling wine with him as well. And it's been a lot of fun. Great guy to work with, and it makes sense given our relationship with him and the music that he does for us every year. And it's fun to sit down and taste wine with him on a yearly basis.
Oh man, I can't wait till the world opens back up again, and hopefully next summer we can get back out there and taste some wines.
I hope so, yes.
Watch some music. Anyway, on that note, I think we got to most of the questions, if not all of them. Thanks very much, Paul, for joining me. I had a blast. Again, I was telling people before you arrived that we've met a couple of times, but I've never actually chatted and hung out and tasted wines with you. So this was something that I was really looking forward to on a personal level. So I want to thank you. Again, I want to thank Wine Roots Magazine for helping us host it and put it together. Check them out. They're phenomenal. Download the app if you haven't downloaded the app. Buy all these wines. I promise you will not be disappointed. But again, thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for tasting with me and telling me all about your wines.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It's been great to have this time, get to know you and to talk as well. And hopefully I'll see you this summer at Langdon Hall or at Tawse.
I look forward to it.
All right. Have a great night.
All right. You as well. Thanks, everyone. Ciao. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.